The world of Mass Effect is one of mystery and wonder, but also horror and death. For eons, the story of organic life in the Milky Way galaxy was one of civilizations rising up from the bounds of their planet, reaching out into the furthest stars, building civilizations that crossed the breadth of the galaxy, only to suddenly and horrifically get snuffed out and join the ranks of their destroyers. In this video, I will look at those that came before, examining the known civilizations that rose before recorded galactic history, stopping at the Protheans. Before I go into some additional notes, if you wish to jump right into the planets, I'll include a bookmark and timestamp so you can jump right to Council and Earth Alliance space. Information on pre-Prothean civilizations is unsurprisingly somewhat hard to come by. As longtime fans of Mass Effect already know, this is by design. The final stage of each Reaper harvest is, after all, for the Reapers to seek and destroy any evidence of a harvested civilization and the manner in which they ended. That said, some relics and information still slip through the cracks. The fact that some data on ancient civilizations persist is both remarkable in some ways, but predictable in others. Throughout a harvest, the Reapers can destroy millions of organic individuals and a comparable amount of data stores, relics, structures, and artifacts every single day. However, these numbers should not necessarily be thought of as constants. This can be explained in different ways, but let's take the analogy of cleaning up after a natural disaster. In the initial phase, you may begin by moving large chunks of debris with heavy equipment. Technically speaking, this counts for a large percentage removed in the initial sweep. As you progress, you'll begin to remove pieces that are smaller or more difficult to reach, which technically count for a smaller percentage of total debris, but take a comparable amount of time and effort to remove. As you engage in more sweeps, you'll uncover things that you missed previously, debris that became buried when you moved larger pieces, etc. Even after you believe that you are finished with cleanup, you may still occasionally come across additional pieces in the future. Reaper harvest can be thought of along similar lines. The opening salvo of a Reaper invasion is completely devastating. Critical infrastructure lay in ruins, the flagships of a target organic race may be quickly disabled and destroyed, and any data sources not useful for the harvest are subject to termination. After the Reapers subdue the opposing defenses and pick up their harvest of a population in earnest, they can destroy any major structures easily enough with their weaponry, and theoretically can direct their indoctrinated thralls to perform more targeted sweeps. Finally, when the Reapers are done harvesting what they need from a planet, they can bombard the surface from orbit, destroy any remaining structures, along with the indoctrinated shock troops who so dutifully helped process their former comrades. Despite this apparently thorough process, it stands to reason that amidst the rubble, some artifacts remain. Again, this is best thought of not as a constant rate of destruction, but rather an exponential rate, one in which a roughly consistent percentage of the civilization's remains are destroyed, which approaches but never quite reaches zero. To quote Peter David in the novel Star Trek Vendetta, there's an old paradox that says if you're standing, say, a meter away from your destination, and then you travel only half that distance, and then half of that new distance, and half of that and so on, you'll never reach your destination. That you become infinitely closer, but never attain your goal. The Reapers may view some evidence of ancient civilizations as undesirable. If a future civilization finds evidence of a previous one, they will naturally wish to investigate what happened to their predecessors on the galactic stage. Depending on what they find, this could give them clues as to the Reapers' existence, their plans, and how to combat them. While said evidence is a concern, it is not necessarily a deal breaker. First, even if a future civilization finds relics from a past civilization, there is no guarantee that these would even come from the same time period as the civilization's harvest. Second, both the past and future peoples would likely have radically different languages, and translation would take a long time if it is even possible. Third, even if said evidence persisted and was properly translated, tales of synthetic destroyers hailing from beyond the galaxy to consume and destroy all that is in its path may simply be dismissed as the superstitious tales of imaginative mortals relegated to the realms of mythology or crank conspiracy theories.
Ah yes, Reapers. The immortal race of sentient starships allegedly waiting in dark space. We have dismissed that claim.
Finally, part of a Reaper plan is the continued monitoring of a civilization's ascent to ensure that they reach a certain technological threshold, but do not advance so far that they would pose a threat to the Reapers themselves. If a Reaper Sentinel tasked with observing this new civilization suspected a problem, they always have the option of kicking off the harvest slightly ahead of schedule. Indeed, the Reapers appear content to allow some evidence of past species to remain for future civilizations to discover. The Reapers specifically want organics to discover mass relay technology and progress in a certain manner so as best to serve as better specimens for future harvests.
Your civilization is based on the technology of the mass relays. Our technology. By using it, your society develops along the paths we desire.
This practical purpose, combined with the Reapers' overwhelming force in the face of any opposition, means that the Reapers do not view archaeological finds as a catastrophic event under all circumstances, as long as the archaeological evidence does not interfere with their plans. As players, we learn about these lost civilizations through plant descriptions, codex entries, etc. A caveat is that I consider some sources, such as Cerberus Daily News and Alliance News Network, to not always necessarily be fully canon. Some entries are supported by in-game text and events, while others are not. Some entries are even clearly jokes on the part of a Bioware team. The entry that stands out the most is an April 1st, 2010 Cerberus Daily News entry on DC 1938, a small garden world that met an untimely end with its sole surviving infant rescued by the MSV Kent, who displayed incredible power. As you can probably tell, this is a rather unsubtle reference to DreamWorks' Megamind, which came out later that year. For that reason, I am sticking with civilizations mentioned in-game that we can map, so some potential members of galactic history will go unmentioned in this video. I will also say that while I include my own personal observations and speculations in this video, I also make an effort to note when something has previously been stated elsewhere. It is possible that some or all of my personal observations were already made by others. If so, all I can say is the following.
Turned out it already existed, but I arrived at it independently.
Finally, not all these past civilizations were necessarily victims of Reaper harvests. We are aware of multiple species that were wiped out in intra- and interplanetary conflict or environmental cataclysm. Even in the modern cycle, we see multiple species driven to the brink of extinction with little to no assistance from our favorite cuttlefish terminators. Given what we know about the Reapers, they very well may view a species that goes extinct due to planetary war or ecological disaster as beneath consideration for their so-called ascension.
Krogan, sterilized race, potential wasted.
Grouping these many far-flung planets is bound to be a somewhat arbitrary task. Some of these planets have rough dates of when life existed, while others do not. Some planets were apparent homeworlds of ancient civilizations, while others were the sites of brief visits, mining facilities, or colonies. Ultimately, I group them by the sector they exist in the modern cycle. I will point out that this unofficial map is based on the borders seen in Mass Effect 3 multiplayer, which carried over to the main game, and if you pay close attention, you will notice that a couple of systems appear to be out of the sector that the Codex or unofficial wiki describes them as being in. While this may have been an oversight when drawing these boundaries, there are other possible explanations that I find worth discussing. The first and simplest is that galactic events and competing claims put the borders of the galaxy in flux. In the case of a Pangaea expanse, both Solarian and human interests move in after the events of the first game. The second, and to me more interesting explanation, is that while maps in Mass Effect depict the galaxy in a two-dimensional plane, much like you would find in an atlas, the cosmos is nowhere near that simple. Not only is the galaxy, of course, three-dimensional, but the necessity of Mass Effect travel to reach various systems makes exploration and borders much messier than you would reasonably expect from a map most would find accessible. It is also worthwhile to note that this list of pre-Prothean civilizations is in no way exhaustive. Remember, I am listing planets that we can map, and though the galaxy map crisscrosses the entire galaxy, it is only a sample of all potential planets. One way of thinking about the prevalence of intelligent life throughout the galaxy is the Drake equation, named after the late astrophysicist Frank Drake. Pause the video if you want to read it, or look at the link provided in the description if you want a more detailed breakdown. Despite this being called an equation, this is more of a thought exercise than any sort of scientific formula, as the values of the variables are virtually unknowable and there are countless other variables at work. It should be noted that there are an estimated 100 billion stars in the Milky Way galaxy, each with an indeterminate number of orbiting planets and celestial bodies. The number of mass relays in the galaxy is unknown, as some are inactive, some are undiscovered, and some are missing. Ultimately, there must be at least thousands of prehistoric civilizations capable of spaceflight, given the estimated thousands of Reapers in existence, and the total number is anyone's guess. Surprisingly enough, there is a conspicuous lack of planets from Council space with confirmed ancient civilizations. There are some possible in-universe explanations for this. For example, it is possible that construction, terraforming, or other activities of new civilizations in these systems buried or obscured evidence of previous ones. It is even possible that some of this history was lost during the Prothean cycle, as the Prothean Empire maintained a significant footprint in this corner of the galaxy. However, the most obvious explanation for this is not lore-based, but rather comes down to design decisions throughout the series. Planet descriptions form the primary source for ancient civilizations. Many planets from Council space do not appear on the galaxy map until Mass Effect 3. Meanwhile, planet descriptions in Mass Effect 3 are far less likely to include archaeological details of ancient civilizations than they are to include history of the Council races that inhabit these systems, as well as the impacts from the ongoing Reaper War. For this reason, we learn less about those who came before in this corner of the galaxy than we might otherwise expect. A minor entry, but notably one of a few from Council space, Yan Tao resides in the Asori system of the Athon cluster. This planet is now a wasteland with an overwhelmingly dense atmosphere of CO2, argon, and small traces of oxygen. However, among the planet's barren surface are what scientists have determined to be former oceans. Though long dead, these oceans once apparently teemed with seafaring life, evidenced by fossils across the surface. Whether this formed the basis of an aquatic civilization similar to the modern Hanar, or the atmosphere died out before life could reach the planet's shores and venture any further, is a question lost to time. Located in the Anjea system of the Nimbus cluster, Carcosa is the only confirmed civilization from Council space included here. Termed a hothouse planet, or one which traps an abnormally high amount of heat in its atmosphere, Carcosa orbits a system with twin suns, one of which is a cool orange dwarf star named Helyme. Scientists currently believe that the planet suffered an out-of-control greenhouse effect brought about by rampant pollution. Little is known of a civilization that inhabited this doomed planet, but researchers have discovered an ancient city centered around a massive residence featuring a throne room, all overlooking a sizable depression. Unless this is the site of an orbital bombardment or a crater caused by an asteroid, then it appears that this depression was a former lake, presumably one that dried up in the planet's ecological calamity. A bit of trivia, this is an apparent reference to Robert W. Chambers' 1895 work, The King in Yellow. This story depicts a city-state on a planet bearing the same name, centered around the Lake of Holly, bringing madness to those who learn of it. Located in Baharsa's system of Kite's Nest, Spekilas is notable for what is not known about this planet. The planet itself is encased in ice with deposits of magnetically active periclase or magnesium metal. These deposits interfere with planetary scans, and some in the galaxy believe this to be intentional. According to these theories, elaborate fortresses exist underneath the ice, hidden from the prying eyes of other species, possibly containing a civilization unknown to the rest of the galaxy. While little stock can be placed in this in-game, it is a possible subject of interest should future games decide to revisit this corner of the galaxy. The planet Altaaya, found in the Sparta system of the Artemis Tau cluster, is currently a frozen wasteland, but represents a mystery hinting at former life. Here, researchers found trace amounts of various chemicals and minerals that suggest the planet formerly contained a thick atmosphere and thus liquids. All of this could have supported living creatures, perhaps even intelligent ones. Given the cycles of organic life in the galaxy, this raises questions about how exactly such an atmosphere disappeared on this planet, if it indeed existed the way scientists speculate. At times, when civilizations visited distant planets, they left behind magnificent works of art that simultaneously left future races both awestruck and mystified. Located in the Metano system of the Maroon Sea lies Chasca, home to one such example. Chasca is tidally locked to its sun, which means that the same side of a planet always faces the star as opposed to maintaining its own independent spin like we have on Earth. This results in a frozen night side opposite to an unbearably hot day side, which reaches temperatures of 67 degrees Celsius or over 150 degrees Fahrenheit. However, the locked orbit means that any spot on the planet will maintain a consistent temperature, which allows for habitation on the planet's surface in more moderate regions with less direct sunlight. This fact allows humanity to set up at least one colony during the events of Mass Effect 1, and almost certainly means that a sapient race in the past could have done the same, which they apparently did. What makes Chasca notable are its apparently artificial planetary rings. These rings catch the light of a local star, scattering its light in a manner described as truly magnificent. While planetary rings are typically made of ice, dust, silicates, and other natural substances, these rings are formed from synthetic materials. This leads to the obvious conclusion that they were an ancient art installation created long ago by creatures unknown. Further, if one completes the Mass Effect 1 mission, Colony of Dead, you will find dragon's teeth in a human settlement. The presence of dragon's teeth, devices used by Reaper forces to convert organics into husks, both raises and potentially answers questions about what happened to those responsible for this ancient wonder of the galaxy. Located in the Han system of the Gemini Sigma cluster is the gas giant of Farcrothu. The planet is of course uninhabitable, but still serves as the nucleus of one of the biggest mysteries of the galaxy. Here, several dozen of the planet's moons were carved in the likeness of an apparent alien arthropod-like species. We get no explanation of how this was accomplished, but the technology of the Mass Effect universe does leave room for possibilities. The species in question is unidentified, as researchers believe this to have taken place around 500,000 years ago, and the creatures do not match any known to the Council government. The purpose behind this is unclear. It could be purely meant as a work of art. It could be a species communicating its own likeness, much like the famed Pioneer plaque. For those that don't know, the Pioneer plaque was sent with the launches of NASA spacecraft Pioneer 10 and 11, both as a greeting to any extraterrestrial species who may one day encounter these vessels, and as a means to depict the human species in general for their reference. Alternatively, this could serve as a monument to the civilization that carved it, or monuments to specific individuals, much like Mount Rushmore or the Statue of Unity in Gujarat, India. Some fans believe that this arthropodal alien race may have even been Reapers, but we do not have enough information to say one way or another. One of the biggest mysteries, and potentially missed opportunities of a modern cycle, comes in the frozen planet of Armeni, found in the Knossos system of the Artemis Tau cluster. On Armeni, orbital probes detected multiple anomalies among the planet's surface, which were later found to be massive crypts. These crypts belong to an ancient civilization known as the Zeoth. Further investigation, however, is stymied by council regulation due to potential violation of cultural norms. This serves as one of the more obscure story elements of the trilogy, but perhaps also potentially one of the biggest missteps of a modern cycle. One of the repeated themes in Mass Effect 1 is how little modern society really knows about the past. Even their immediate predecessors, the Protheans, are largely a mystery despite their overarching impact on the civilizations of the modern cycle. Here, however, on the planet Armeni, lies the remnants of an ancient civilization of unknown origin and unknown fate. To put it mildly, modern civilizations could learn a lot from studying these ruins, from potential lost technology to possible evidence of the Reapers themselves. All this is lost, however, due to regulatory obscurities and indecision over whether it's appropriate to disturb bodies that have been dead for millions of years.
Plow these motherfuckers up, plow them into the streams and rivers of America. If we're gonna recycle, let's get serious. Thank you.
According to these theories, elaborate fortresses exist underneath the ice, hidden from the prying eyes of other species, possibly containing a civilization unknown to the rest of the galaxy.
Crab people, taste like crab, talk like people, crab people.
Beginning in Mass Effect 1, the Attican Traverse gets a fair amount of lore exposition that depicts the mystery of the Mass Effect universe and reinforces just how new humanity is on the galactic stage. As such, we see a number of planets that formerly housed civilizations before their time ran out. The first example of this is the planet Vecchio, which literally translates to old. Located in the Vecchio system of the Ismar frontier, Vecchio is a hot, inhospitable planet compared to Earth. Here, scientists discover primitive burial sites among the mountains of the planet's equators. These simple graves contain the remains of what were human-like creatures with primitive ceramic implements nearby. There is no evidence that these remains belong to any visitors, as the nearest garden world shows no signs of former habitation, and the unsophisticated nature of these sites do not suggest a spaceflight species anyway. These facts, along with the caveman-like settlements we find, suggest that this planet represents a would-be civilization that, for lack of a better description, never quite made it. Gigula is the outermost moon of the gas giant Galeon, located in the Daca system of the Nubian Expanse. This moon is the site of a famously well-preserved ancient starship discovered by the Turian military. The ship's origin and crew is a mystery, but research on the ship suggests that it belonged to a horizontally oriented species. The nearby planet of Pragia is a potential candidate for the ship's origin, as the planet proves perfectly capable of supporting sapient life. However, this is pure speculation. Study of Pragia is hampered by invasive plant species introduced by Batarian interests, as well as criminal elements that use the isolated planet and overgrown environment as a place to hide away from prying eyes. Ultimately, we never get any in-game hints as to the ship's true origins. The mysterious planet of Zaherux is located in the Grissom system of the Armstrong Nebula. Like Spekilas in Earth System's Alliance space, Zaherux is the subject of memes and theories which are considered baseless by the reputable scientists of the galaxy. First, it should be noted that the planet itself is exceedingly hostile. It hosts a nitrogen-argon atmosphere that continuously thins due to the harsh solar winds of its local star. Its surface is further covered in massive lakes of loose silicate dust, which occasionally kick up into sandstorms far greater in size and scope than any seen on Earth. Researchers and explorers have sent a number of probes to learn more about this planet, but all have been lost in the planet's inhospitable environment. According to conspiracy theories by the likes of Asari author Delcia Orthisa, the planet is actually home to a sort of nanotechnology which turns hostile the moment any alien artifacts enter their domain. Despite the unfounded nature of these claims, it is anyone's guess what exactly the galaxy will find if they ever explore this barren planet. Located in the Gagarin system of the Armstrong Nebula, Junthor is a cold, desolate planet. The atmosphere that covers the planet is paradoxically a similar thickness to Earth's, but composed of CO2 and chlorine rather than nitrogen and oxygen. Along the planet's equators, researchers discovered the ruins of arcologies, which are massive structures that fused with the planet's natural ecology and other assorted structures. Amid these ruins lay a column with two mysterious inscriptions. On one side, "Walk among these works and know our greatness." On the other, "Monsters from the Id." Many will recognize the first inscription as a reference to Percy Bysshe Shelley's famed sonnet, Ozymandias, a poem typically interpreted as concerning the nature of hubris and the legacy of self-styled great men. Others have pointed out that Monsters from the Id is a direct quote from the influential 1956 science fiction film, The Forbidden Planet. This film portrays a planet that experienced an extinction-level event caused by civilization inventing technology that accidentally creates doomsday creatures from their own subconscious. It is worth pointing out that this planetary civilization was not necessarily the victims of the Reapers. Going by the description, the architecture on this planet is remarkably intact, given that the Reapers typically prefer to eliminate any evidence of their victims' existence altogether. The Monsters from the Id quote arguably references the dangers of artificial intelligence. Still, the quote implies that they brought about their own destruction rather than had destruction foisted upon them. Found in the Hecate system of the Hades Nexus Nebula, Bothros is home to sites featuring melted scraps of metal and the frozen remains of a primate-like species. These creatures died wearing suits apparently made for leaving their vehicles and traversing the planet's icy surface. Further research shows that the planet's population centers were destroyed in powerful orbital bombardments similar to those found on other worlds. It should be pointed out that these creatures' remains did not come from the blast sites, but instead apparently belonged to creatures fleeing the bombardment. After fleeing their destroyers, these unfortunate souls were fated to become trapped in the planet's ice and die of asphyxiation. Despite being an advanced species, the Codex notes that there is no evidence that this species visited the nearby planet of Asteria. However, when combined with the frozen, largely uninhabitable nature of Bothros, a troubling suggestion arises. Specifically, that the former inhabitants of this planet, whose frozen corpses scientists observe, may not have been native to this planet at all. Instead, they may have been refugees of an ancient Reaper harvest, hiding from the doomsday devices that claim the rest of their species, only to be harvested or annihilated on their final refuge from the slaughter. Located in the Schwarzschild system of the Hawking Eta cluster, Etamis is a one-time garden state, somewhat larger than Earth, and home to a once thriving civilization. Modern archaeologists know of this civilization's existence from the few relics that survived this planet's cataclysm, which they date back somewhere between 20 and 40 million years ago. The civilization in question was destroyed by a devastating and thorough orbital bombardment by kinetic weapons. This bombardment hit every population center on the planet and was so apparently calculated as to rule out natural causes such as meteor showers. As many will notice, this is a recurring pattern throughout the galaxy. Located in the Century system of a Hawking Eta cluster, Klendagon itself is notable not for being the home of a former civilization, but instead representing the final moments of one. A desert world, Klendagon hosts a somewhat weaker gravity and thinner atmosphere compared to Earth, and perhaps most resembles Earth's neighbor, Mars. The planet's most renowned feature is its massive planetary split visible from space known as the Great Rift Valley. The Great Rift Valley is a subject of interest to the galaxy's scientists, as it appears to be the result of a weapon of extraordinary power rather than a natural event. This hypothesis is supported by the planet's moon, Presrop, itself the site of numerous planetary strikes, creating an artificially rugged terrain. In the modern cycle, we learn that this rift is indeed the result of a mass accelerator cannon fired 37 million years ago. The weapon is now inoperable, and the civilization that fired it is long dead. Still, they managed to accomplish something that likely few civilizations throughout galactic history can boast of. They killed a capital-class Reaper. This Reaper, functionally dead, but still structurally intact and dangerous to organic minds, is found in the atmosphere of a gas giant, Mnemosyne, located in the neighboring system of Thorn. In other words, this ancient ordnance traveled across systems to lay waste to the surface of Klendagon. We never learn of the civilization behind this awe-inspiring piece of galactic artillery or the world that produced it, but the planet Etamis is a plausible candidate. As you may recall, Etamis is located in the neighboring system of Schwarzschild, also part of the Hawking Eta cluster. More importantly, the planetary extinction event of Etamis is estimated between 20 and 40 million years ago and would fit the estimated 37 million years ago in which this ancient battle took place. It is worth pointing out that based on the map of the Hawking Eta cluster, this weapon would not have been fired from Etamis itself, as Thorn does not lie between the Schwarzschild and Century systems. Instead, it stands to reason that the weapon was fired from the same system in which this derelict Reaper is found. If so, and should the weapon indeed belong to the dead people of Etamis, it appears that they either ventured to engage the Reapers in this neighboring system, or that they developed their Reaper killer away from their homeworld. One thing is for certain, and that is that the ancient civilization in question spent its final moments engaging the Reaper Armada in a cataclysmic battle that scarred the galaxy. According to conspiracy theories by the likes of Asari author Delcia Orthisa, the planet is actually home to a sort of nanotechnology which turns hostile the moment any alien artifacts enter their domain. Located on the opposite end of the galaxy from Council space, the Terminus systems exists outside Council governance and is considered hostile territory to most who hail from the other side of the Attican Traverse. Despite this, members of Council races often inhabit this zone, and researchers have learned much about the dead peoples that once called it home. What they found reveals the ancient history of the Terminus systems to be perhaps the most fascinating in the galaxy. Indeed, the archaeological evidence of ancient civilizations in these systems is surprisingly detailed and reveals much of those who came before and built their empires among the stars. Located in the Amata system of the Omega Nebula, the frozen planet of Anjea is an ammonia-methane ice giant not terribly unlike our Sol system planet of Neptune. While spacecraft have landed planetside, there exists little evidence of prior sapient life on this planet. However, scans do reveal coffin-like structures in orbit around the planet's equator, complete with sails or wings that keep them afloat. The ancient people behind this spacefaring gravesite is unknown. Whatever the source, these coffins offer the planet a certain symbolic significance in Mass Effect 2 as the planet becomes available following the Normandy crash site mission. Located in the Dorada system of Pylos Nebula, Siano is named after a contrarian Asari philosopher. This naming perhaps makes sense, as Siano orbits Dorada at retrograde or in the opposite direction of the star's primary rotation. Also notable is that Siano, rather than maintaining an independent spin, is tidally locked to the Dorada star, meaning that the same side of Siano always faces Dorada. It's as if Siano always maintains eye contact as it contradicts this celestial body. Moreover, Siano is not even believed to be native to this solar system, but rather be an extrasolar capture that ventured into the system from parts unknown. Researchers even believe this arrival to be the cause of a local asteroid belt created by Siano colliding with another planetoid as it entered the system. Whatever the planet's origins, we do know that it was once home to sapient life. Artificial structures, though battered by the elements over the millennia, apparently exist on the planet's northern hemisphere facing the sun. Further, radioactive materials on the planet's dark side have been discovered, the waste products of nuclear fission plants. It is unclear who once lived on this planet or what befell their civilization. It is worth pointing out that based on the limited information in the planet's description, that this civilization likely predated the planet's capture in the Dorada system. The reason for this assumption is that tidally locked planets typically only support life in specific areas due to the extreme conditions on the lightest and darkest regions of these planets. Here, however, the artificial structures are located in a zone where they are battered and degraded by solar radiation, whereas the former power plants exist in a dark zone which would likewise be unsuitable for habitation. If this assumption is correct, it raises questions as to whether the civilization on this planet managed to escape their homeworld before it spiraled out of its original system, or if they were victims of some kind of gravitational or solar calamity. Located in the Z-Cha system of the Shrike Abyssal, both Aphras and Tosal Nym are garden planets within the same system, a rarity in the Milky Way galaxy. Aphras featured flourishing vertebrate life forms, including sapient avian or bird-like species. Tosal Nym, for its part, contained plentiful invertebrate aquatic life. No timeline is given for life here, and we do not know if the twin garden planets also gave rise to twin civilizations. The possibilities are enticing, but unfortunately the galaxy will never truly know what possible cultures may have arisen from these flourishing worlds. Instead, evidence shows that these planets suffered a massive, coordinated orbital bombardment, apparently targeting their population centers, sending extinction-level amounts of dust into the atmosphere. Unsurprisingly, this cataclysm exterminated all but the most basic forms of life. Like other planets that befell the same fate, the apparent coordination of this bombardment rules out natural causes such as meteor showers, planetary collision, or volcanic activity, and instead points to an intentional and obviously successful campaign to exterminate life on these twin garden worlds. Located in the Phi Cleo system of the Rosetta Nebula, Parnassus and Cyllene are largely unexplored in the modern cycle. Parnassus is an inhospitable frying pan of a planet clocking in at over 150 degrees Celsius or 300 degrees Fahrenheit. Whatever species inhabited this planet must have either been tolerant of such extremes or, more obviously, originated from a planet with a more tolerable climate and simply possessed the means to protect themselves here. Moreover, this species made good use of the conditions that drove temperatures to such highs with geothermal and solar power plants. This resourcefulness extended to Cyllene, a nearby gas giant. Like many other gas giants in the Milky Way galaxy, Cyllene shows evidence of mining for helium-3. In the Mass Effect universe, helium-3 is used in nuclear fusion reactors and fusion torches. The Codex notes that this planet exists within the frost line of its star. In other words, the distance at which the heat from a star becomes low enough for gaseous compounds to condense into such gas giants. Because of this, it is suggested that this serves as an example of an extrasolar capture. The Codex further notes that this planet's distance from the nearest mass relay, combined with the outmoded design of its helium-3 stations, suggests that this system was originally discovered without the use of mass relay travel. Moreover, the official planet description for Parnassus notes that specifically does not exist in Citadel records, even though Cyllene does. This description even suggests that the absence is intentional, that somebody scrubbed records of this planet from Citadel databases. If these records were intentionally deleted, the obvious questions would be when, by who, and most importantly, why. When goes unanswered, but would shed some additional light here. If this was recently deleted from official records, it stands to reason that someone either wished to mine the planets for its resources without any pesky competitors, or that they otherwise wish to use the planet's facilities for purposes they had reason to hide from the Citadel Council. However, another distinct possibility exists. Parnassus is largely uninhabitable to modern species, and likely was to whomever first settled this planet. Still, the facilities could offer some protection from the elements. Such a planet, so far out of the way from the mass relay network, may seem useless to a galactic civilization under normal circumstances. However, its obscurity, obvious inhospitable nature, and perceived uselessness could have been perfect for a group wishing to flee a galactic extinction event. In this scenario, a prior civilization may have discovered the system using archaic means of faster-than-light travel. For a time, they may have used its planets as something of a waypoint before discovering the mass relays themselves. Unsurprisingly, they would have abandoned the system once more hospitable and convenient systems emerged. Once the Reapers arrived, some of this civilization's members may have thought quickly enough to identify the system as a potential place to hide, hastily deleted the planet from Citadel records, and spent the rest of their lives far away from the ongoing slaughter plaguing the rest of their unfortunate fellow citizens. This is of course pure speculation, but this system, like many others, presents its own mysteries, with the few facts we do know providing more questions than answers. Found in the Enoch system of Rosetta Nebula, Job was once a lush garden world, home to a flourishing civilization cohabitating with equally flourishing vegetation. Little is known of this civilization besides the following. First, that they resembled Earth-born primates. Second, they managed to achieve interplanetary spaceflight with bunker settlements on the desert world of Laban. Third, at some point, this civilization was exterminated. As with many ancient civilizations, nearly all evidence of this species' existence was wiped out, with their population centers obliterated by orbital bombardment. This extinction event, which even targeted the satellites of a nearby gas giant of Mizraim, vaporized the population centers and kicked up apocalyptic dust storms that killed all plant life, leaving even the atmosphere in ruins. Notably, people of a modern cycle know of this once great society, not just through the bunkers found on the settlements of Laban, but also through time capsules buried on their home planet of Job. These time capsules apparently survived due to their distance from the blast radius, indicating that for every one that was discovered, many more were likely destroyed in the strikes. Unfortunately for modern researchers, these capsules depict the planet's one-time civilization millennia ago, but not their extinction. Needless to say, we can likely guess the culprits behind these people's demise. Based out of the Cyllene system of Crescent Nebula, the Arthenni are believed to call Helyme their home. Termed a post-garden world, or a planet that once featured lush vegetation like Earth, only to befall mass ecological disaster. In this case, scientists speculate that the disaster to be biological in nature, with a bioweapon released upon the population. In the modern cycle, Asari interests have acted on this hypothesis and formed an orbital blockade around the planet to prevent any rogue ships from landing planetside and bringing these pathogens back with them. Curiously, the planet was also devastated by apparent global wildfires which destroyed the remaining plant life. With no obvious culprit, researchers believe this to be the indirect result of the biological disaster. In this scenario, the death of oxygen-breathing life led to rampant oxidation of the atmosphere, providing ample fuel for lightning storms to ignite. Meanwhile, Galeon is a gas giant surrounded by rings of ice, silicate dust, and other rocky materials, much like the rings of Saturn. Researchers believe that the Arthenni civilization mined the inner rings for helium-3, used in nuclear fusion reactors and fusion torches. However, this is not the result of any equipment found, but rather the destroyed remains of nano-manufactured carbon materials indicative of manufacturing processes and technology that may actually surpass that of a modern cycle. The outer rings further contain debris with evidence of shock damage and rapid heating. Some amateur sleuths believe that the rings of Galeon consist partially of vessels or even moons destroyed by mass accelerator weapons. However, this theory is dismissed by traditional researchers who note that warring nations generally have no reason to attempt to completely obliterate moons. Finally, the planet of Epho, while a rocky world, was also inhabited by the Arthenni civilization. Unlike Helyme, Epho has an atmosphere heavy in carbon, but still consists of oxygen as well, which apparently made it suitable for Arthenni settlement, as would the series of waterways which form canyons along the planet's equator. Traces of the Arthenni civilization show up in the ruins of various magnetic levitation rail lines. The planet is also dotted with massive craters, which researchers believe represent former mining sites and population centers. Putting all this together and knowing what we know as the audience, the Cyllene system demonstrates many of the hallmarks of a prior Reaper harvest. The Arthenni may have been the dominant species of their cycle. They may have settled other systems. They may or may not have been converted by the Reapers. Whether or not any of the above were truly the case, the Reapers would have taken note of such a civilization during their periodic harvest. If this species could not provide the necessary genetic material to produce a capital class Reaper or any other type of Reaper, the Reapers could still repurpose its citizen into labor or shock troops should they choose to do so. More importantly, we see evidence of a final stage of the Reaper harvest, to destroy as much evidence of a prior civilization as possible. Finally, any discussion of pre-Prothean civilizations must include the Mnemosyne cycle. The Mnemosyne were to the Protheans what the Protheans were to the modern cycle. In other words, a civilization that built an interstellar empire that preceded the Protheans, leaving their own mark upon the galaxy for the Protheans to discover millennia later. Information on the civilization is limited, but they remain one of the few ancient civilizations to have their name known in the modern cycle. Also notable is the fact that we know the name of one of their rival civilizations, the Thoi'Hann. Records of the Thoi'Hann come from a planet Anjea located in the Amata system of the Omega Nebula. As others have pointed out, Anjea and its moon, Bariah, apparently refer to the Australian Jawan deities responsible for the birth of life, perhaps suggesting that the planet was once a lush, hospitable garden world. Researchers believe that the two races both wished to colonize the planet and were not interested in cohabitation. The neighboring planet of Carcosa was also the site of devastating impacts, perhaps caused by meteors, but it is also possible that the impacts were related to this war. As an aside, the coffins of the planet Anjea could even come from this conflict, but that is of course pure speculation. It is not clear which side had the upper hand during the war, but regardless, the long-term result was an ecological disaster. Hundreds of starships were destroyed, left to eventually fall from orbit into the planet, their drive cores spilling element zero across its terrain. Exposure to the substance irrevocably altered life on the planet, killing off untold numbers of species and mutating others, often with biotic abilities. While technically habitable, the toxified landscape and hostile wildlife deters colonization, leaving the planet little more than a mutated hellscape. We learn of one more planet the Mnemosyne inhabited, and that is the one-time garden world of Ilos. Ilos exists in the refuge system of the Pangea Expanse. It borders the planet of Zaph, a small gas giant, surrounded by debris suggested to be the remains of helium-3 mining stations, perhaps destroyed in an ancient war, along with Agitoten, later the home and graveyard of an estimated 100,000 Protheans. It is curious that Ilos is left remarkably intact compared to many other worlds of dead civilizations, but the planet's isolation throughout the years does allow it to become a safe haven for others in the future. Despite its status as a former garden world, the planet's environment has become more hostile over the millennia. The surface has turned to a rust color, perhaps due to the heavily oxidized atmosphere. The oxygen-rich atmosphere, frequent lightning storms, atmospheric pressure exceeding 10 atmospheres, and surface temperatures of about 38 degrees Celsius further create conditions in which frequent wildfires dot the landscape. All this has the additional effect of killing off most animal life. Despite the calamitous nature of the planet's environment, it is technically livable. The real reason that modern civilizations have not settled on this planet is because its mass relay went missing. This relay, referred to as the Mu relay, was believed pushed out of its position by a supernova around 4,000 years ago, millennia after the planet was abandoned. When this happened, it found itself in the midst of a nebula cloaked in space dust and radiation. Undamaged but still active, the relay was lost to spacefaring species who had no reliable means of detecting the construct in the vastness of space. While records and knowledge of Ilos persist into the modern cycle, charting an expedition without the benefit of mass relay travel is an expensive, difficult, and dangerous task, especially considering that Ilos sits outside of settled Council space. Despite all this, Ilos is something of a marvel. The planet, settled by both the Mnemosyne and later the Protheans, boasts its own unique and impressive art and architecture, which either by design or the effects of time blends with the vegetation, almost like an archaeology. Also notable are the sculptures among the ruins. As we later learn, the Prothean adopted a more insectoid appearance than the nearly human forms seated on these ancient thrones. This leaves a few different possibilities. One is that these sculptures represented a different race that became a part of the Prothean Empire. Another is that these were more artistic forms, not necessarily depicting any particular race. The final, and perhaps most intriguing possibility, is that we are looking at the only visual representation of the Mnemosyne themselves 100 millennia after their extinction as a species. The exact timeline of Mnemosyne history is unknown. Given the typical 50,000 year time span between cycles, this suggests that the civilization existed between 150 and 100,000 prior to the modern cycle, but these are only ballpark numbers. The War of Engana, for instance, occurs an estimated 127,000 years ago. That year suggests that the war took place about halfway through the cycle, but the advanced technology suggests that both civilizations were close to the stage at which reapers harvest their victims. Perhaps much like the modern cycle, there existed several spaceflight civilizations, and that the reapers waited for another that they deemed more suitable to ascend before beginning the harvest. It is likely that we will never know. Ultimately, like those that came before the Mnemosyne, their successors were left to assume that they were the ones who built the Citadel and mass relay network, none the wiser to their rise and fall as a species. The Mass Effect trilogy comes at the end of a cycle, one that is repeated innumerate times before. In each age of galactic history, untold multitudes built their own civilizations, discovered the wonders of the galaxy, and forged empires across the stars, ignorant of the fate that ultimately awaited them. While the pattern of their existence repeated itself in large part by design, they all had their own unique cultures, languages, art, and way of life. All this would eventually be plucked from the world of sapient life to build a being whose new purpose would be to repeat this cycle. While they were extinguished from the world of the living, remnants of their legacy would still be found amongst the ruins of the stars. I hope that you enjoyed this video. This will conclude my series on ancient aliens of the Mass Effect universe before we get into the Prothean cycle. As always, feel free to like and subscribe if you enjoy these videos. Also feel free to like and subscribe if you don't. Thanks for watching. Moreover, Siano is not even believed to be native to this solar system, but rather be an extrasolar capture that ventured into the system from parts unknown.
I just wish we could all get along like we used to in middle school. I wish that I could bake a cake made out of rainbows and smiles, and we'd all eat it, be happy.
She doesn't even go here.